Welcome to the False Victim tutorial, where you will learn about the false victim archetype and what it means to be a false victim. The false victim is a part of the self that acts disadvantaged with the intention to gain advantage. And this part of who we are has the superpower of covert manipulation. The false victim lives by the motto, I can't do this, but can you? Where manipulation is the name of this game. So, who is the false victim? Well, each one of us has at some time been the victim of some type of mistreatment, verbal or physical abuse, where we've been afraid and helpless in certain situations. Yet, not to be confused with genuine victimhood, the false victim is the part of us that portrays the role of a victim purely to gain advantage. You see, there is the experience of being victimized and then embracing the false victim identity. The false victim is a characteristic trait that puts on the appearance of being helpless and incapable just to gain sympathy from those who are willing to provide the benefits of attention, physical assistance, financial gain, or material resources. The false victim wants to live the effortless, trouble-free, leisurely and unhurried existence and sees other people as the meal ticket. And there are two different types of false victimization: helpless false victimization and sympathy false victimization. Let's discuss helpless false victimization. Wherever and whenever possible, the false victim acts incompetent in order to not get the hands dirty with menial work, organizing tasks, nor engaging with tough chores. The false victim part of you will always project you as being unknowing and powerless in situations that require responsibility. The false victim will over-dramatize and exaggerate itself as being the helpless damsel in distress or the man with troubled plans, fabricating situational needs and creating these urgent emergency situations with a carefully crafted sob story that will gain the assistance required. There is a beneficial asset to being the false victim. The false victim knows exactly what buttons to push in order to get others to assist with a particular situation. And even though done with false pretense, the false victim does attract the good nature of those that will willingly consent to helping, where the false victim will form close relationships with people that have a victor's mentality. And people do love taking on the role of a victor to help the victim. However, we must now look at the detrimental impact of being the false victim. When trying to extort generosity and favours from others, the false victim will manipulate, influence and badger people even. This creates a lopsided relationship where the giving and taking is imbalanced, which can lead to the giver rebuking and resenting the taker. Lacking self-sufficiency, the false victim is forever dependent on others for advice, guidance, reassurance, care and support, without stretching the wings to fly with independent efforts. The false victim never encounters the type of situational experiences that builds strength of character, skill sets and resilience, which reinforces one as being helpless in certain, if not most, aspects of life. Those who do offer the false victim their one-way assistance then become the unsuspecting enablers that reinforce the suffragette mentality. The false victim role is reinforced by those who play the counter role of its victor. Now let's talk about sympathy false victimization. The false victim is always looking to qualify his or her emotions of helplessness, using self-pitying language to gain sympathy and support from others, exaggerating misfortune or ill treatment. The beneficial asset is that the false victim is masterful of the art of sympathy as a means to gain allegiance and cultivate close relationships with people that appreciate vulnerability. Sympathy is a great way to share feelings and form a strong bond with people. Even so, portraying oneself as the victim that's looking for sympathy does have a detrimental impact. When looking for sympathy, more often than not, we cultivate relationships that are built around poor little me. Stories of sorrow, misfortune, and loss. The more we attune to the negative frequency of how difficult and unfair life is, the more we condition the mind into a victim's mentality, which is the inability to see the upside nor be the solution to our own problems. The false victim will often complain about how hard life is, even though one is getting their basic needs and desires met. Since actions speak louder than words, those with eyes to see will know that they are dealing with someone that is being hypocritical and insincere, where the false victim starts to repel people with doubt and mistrust. The false victim is also likely to form negative alliances with other victims, where they affirm to each other how uneasy and difficult life is. The co-victim birds of a feather, they tend to end up roasted together, sealed within the furnace of lower self-traits that makes life this heated ordeal of problems after problems that have to be continuously dealt with. The false victim is also a magnet for those with a villain mentality. The villain is attracted to the false victim's projected traits of weakness, vulnerability, and helplessness. When subordinate to the dominant intimidation of a villain, in fear of stepping out of line, the false victim tends to endure poor treatment, which often leads to an abusive relationship where they then become the real victim. So let's summarize the false victim archetype. The false victim archetype can be a useful survival technique where being intentionally helpless is a means to get one's needs and desires met. Because sometimes we just don't have the time, the money, resources, or relationships that we need to get to the next stage of our life. And therefore, doing whatever we need to do to get the help is essential. Since people are more willing to help a victim, the false victim characteristic trait does have the power to get a quick response. However, the false victim is likely to act weak, frail, feeble, cowardly, unsure, fearful, hesitant, incapable, shy, easily hurt most of the time. The emotions and actions that we portray soon become deeply ingrained traits. When playing the role of a victim for long enough, one starts to believe the downtrodden stories they weave. Over time, there is a gradual loss of self-confidence, self-worth, and self-respect, where the false victim then becomes the real victim. When the false victim is a prominent role, one starts to convince themselves that life is unfair, unfavourable, and ill-fated. From this bleak outlook, the false victim develops a psychological condition known as learned helplessness, which is the limited belief that one can't overcome problematic situations and progress forward. Learned helplessness is not so obvious and yet can be recognised in every situation that we need permission and assistance to do something that we could have otherwise taken the initiative to do ourselves. Even the toughest of people have veered on the side of being helpless when seeking permission and assistance. So, where does the false victim show up in your life? Where have you adopted the victim's mentality because it is helping you get what you want without you having to put much effort in? Where have you deemed yourself as being useless, helpless, and unable? Where are you recounting the problems in your life and projecting yourself as being the victim of a person, a circumstance, or a life condition that you could otherwise be the victor and solution if you took responsibility and action? Have a think about it. Contemplate the false victim archetype. Then move on to the fourth archetypal profile of the devious dozen, where you will learn about the sadist.